What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We are here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice. This time for the single game showdown slate, Thursday Night Football, FanDuel and DraftKings, Buffalo Bills, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. In these showdown videos every Thursday and Monday, we talk about the injuries that impact the slate, low risk, high risk lineup construction tips, general showdown strategies to help get you to the top of those contest leaderboards. Let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. And let's talk about the injuries for the Bucks and the Bills. And we'll start with Tampa Bay. Both Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin are on the injury report listed as questionable. However, the coaching staff, beat reporters all expect them to play and to be good to go. So we should expect the typical workload, typical performance, whatever you think that may be, for both Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin. So that's fine. Tampa Bay is missing one of their left guards. He is out due to injury, so a little bit of a shakeup among the offensive line. But then probably the most important factor for someone who's not in the player pool is their defensive tackle, Vita Vea, who's been one of the best run-stopping defensive tackles since he entered the league. He is extremely questionable to play, has not practiced the entire week. National reporters and beat reporters are both referring to him as a true game-time decision. So while it won't really impact how we play tonight's slate, if Vea is ruled out for Tampa Bay, that does give a little more credibility to the Buffalo offense in general, but especially James Cook, and probably even more so Latavius Murray, especially down around the goal line. Tampa Bay is known to be one of the best run-stuffing teams since Todd Bowles has been there. And losing a big piece like Vita Vea is probably could probably change that. So let's just keep that in mind as we watch the news throughout the day. Tampa Bay has also activated Chase Edmonds, injured reserve, was brought over in the offseason, hurt his hamstring early. He will be back tonight. He was activated, I believe, yesterday. If not officially, then he'll be activated today. And he could be in line to be their number 2 running back tonight behind Rachaad White. So now on Buffalo's side, the biggest injury they have is Dawson Knox. Underwent wrist surgery, played the entire game last week, or most of the game, and sort of unexpected, was dealing with this wrist issue for a couple of weeks. He's officially been placed on injured reserve, I believe. Either way, he's out this week, this game tonight against the Bucks, which means we have, where is he? Dalton Kincaid at 5K, the rookie receiver, tight end. He's going to play a ton of snaps tonight, get most of the workload, will not have to split any snaps with Dawson Knox. Now, if Quentin Morris was also active, we may see Kincaid stay in a similar role and a bump in snaps for Quentin Morris. However, Quentin Morris is also out. They're number 3 tight end. So it's just Dalton Kincaid on the active roster as their true tight end. Should play a ton of snaps. Now, they are going to call up one tight end at the bottom of the roster. He's on the practice squad, and that is Joel Wilson. Hasn't been active this year. They're going to call him up. He'll be the number 2 tight end. They also have Reggie Gilliam, who technically is listed as a fullback on the depth chart, a running back in the DraftKings player pool, but historically he has played this H-back role for Buffalo. He'll probably play ahead of Joel Wilson, I would think, just based on his veteran experience. And he's min-priced, could be on the field a lot, mostly for blocking snaps, but at $200, if he catches a touchdown, which we've seen him do in the past, he could be in the optimal lineup. Either way, a lot of opportunity up for grabs. Although Dawson Knox hasn't been that productive, his availability certainly impacts the potential production of all these other guys. So with Dawson Knox out, we certainly have some more options and some underpriced guys on the Buffalo side. All right, that does it for the injuries that will impact the slate. Let's talk about low-risk contests, 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads, contests where you just have to beat half the field to double your money. Let's look at it. Now, if you have tuned into these videos, you read our showdown guide. I say this every week. For our longtime listeners and followers, you know what I'm about to say. For you new viewers, if you haven't read our showdown guide, it's on occupyfantasy.com. It looks at historical showdown data, winning lineup results. One of the strategies we use in low-risk contests is trying to lock up all the scoring, playing both quarterbacks, playing both running backs when it's not a split backfield, and playing any values that stand out. So by that definition, we're going to want to play Allen, if possible. Allen, Mayfield, Rachaad White, starting running back for the Buccaneers, and probably James Cook. Yes, he does split work with Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray may get more work in this game in a potential blowout, if they're up by double digits and they run out the clock in the second half, if they have more success on the ground with Vita Vea, if he's out, then Latavius Murray sure could take some work from Cook, but Cook plays in the passing game, gets enough work to be considered for this low risk format. Then you also have Dalton Kincaid, who's technically underpriced at 5K. Now, if we knew Knox was out, he would be priced in the 6K to 8K range, like we see most starting receiving capable tight ends on showdown slates. So he's underpriced by at least 1K, but probably $1,500 or $2,000 based on his new role. That would leave us with a $7,400 captain. We could put a kicker in captain. This is just an idea, but these are the 5 guys you want to try to get into your lineup. Now, it is scary, and it's not the best low risk night as a result, because we would still have to fade Stephon Diggs, one of the highest volume receivers in the NFL. We would have to fade Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and we're still playing not the greatest running backs in the world in Rashad White, in James Cook. This is the route I would go. Captain one of these guys. Like, if you captain Josh Allen, you can't do this, right? You could $1,500. You could do this, and you could play someone like Trent Sherfield, like Deontay Hardy. We know Deontay Hardy's going to get some passes. That's a pretty decent low risk lineup. Again, it's not the best because of the fade of mostly Stephon Diggs, but it is possible to build a decent low risk lineup tonight on DraftKings. Now, FanDuel, it's a little tougher, and you still have to fade Diggs in that aspect. But you can only fit 3 of the 4 guys. So Allen, Mayfield, Cook, or Rashad White. Let's go here. Either way, whichever one you pick, you have to choose between the running backs, Cook or White. Here, you have to play Dalton Kincaid in low-risk contests and even smaller field GPPs at $7,500, completely underpriced. He's going to be extremely popular. He's a guy that you have to get into your low-risk lineups. $9,500 per player. You could play Bass, McLaughlin, one of the kickers, a tight end as well. You could take Mayfield out. You could take White out. Different ways to play around with it. Either way, this is the core for low-risk contests tonight. Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid. How you fit around the rest. It's not ideal for low-risk contests, but certainly some options. And I think it's not one of those slates where we say completely avoid low risk. It's not the best. It's one of those in-between low-risk slates. All right, let's instead talk about why you all are here. High-risk contests, leagues, GPPs, satellites. Big prizes on both sites, 150K on FanDuel up for grabs, 500K up for grabs on DraftKings. Obviously, all kinds of different GPPs. That's why you tune in. You have to beat a lot of people to win a lot of money. Let's talk about some strategies, some players I like for those types of contests. And we'll start. Where should we start? Let's start with the underperforming wide receivers. So if you've been around Occupy Fantasy, you know the definition of an underperforming wide receiver. For those that are uninitiated, underperforming wide receiver are these guys who have seen a lot of targets, a lot of volume all over the field, around the goal line, deep shots. Essentially, over the past 3 weeks, while they've received this volume, their fantasy points haven't necessarily followed. Drop passes, off-target throws, whatever it may be, penalties. We do include penalty plays in our underperforming wide receiver calculation. These guys who have been underperforming typically are in line for huge days if the volume continues. And we see some GPP winning plays emerge from this underperforming wide receiver group every single week, every single year. And we have 3 of those guys on this slate tonight. We have Chris Godwin for the Tampa Bay Bucks, who I said at the top, questionable, but is expected to play, has not scored a touchdown this year. That's on, 19, 30, 43, 49 targets. He's due for a touchdown. Last time we said this, A.J. Dillon scored a touchdown when we talked about underperforming players in general on a showdown slate, how many touches they've gone without a touchdown. It's Chris Godwin's turn tonight. 49 targets without a touchdown. He is on our underperforming wide receiver list. We have Gabe Davis, $6,800 on DraftKings. If we look at Gabe Davis, obviously had the 3 touchdown stretch from weeks 3 through 5, 4 touchdown stretch from weeks 2 through 5. Hasn't scored in the last 2 weeks, despite 9 targets, tons and tons of air yards. And he is kind of right in line with Godwin on how much he's been underperforming and how much expected volume he's supposed to have, expected points he's supposed to have. So Gabe Davis, Chris Godwin, in the similar vein in terms of their underperforming nature. And finally, and this may shock you based on how many fantasy points he's actually scored, but Stephon Diggs is near the top of our list as well. We have about 15 guys on the underperforming wide receiver list this week. He is number 3 in terms of guys, in terms of the difference between their expected points and their actual points, which is crazy because he scored so many fantasy points in the last 3 weeks. We look at this, 51, 68, 69 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks, and yet he's still underperforming. Of all the guys on the underperforming wide receiver list this week, he has the most expected fantasy points by more than 20 compared to the number 2 guy. So, high volume stud who's already getting a ton of points and is expected to score even more. So, Diggs, I think we have to consider strongly in all contest types tonight as a result. And that's another reason why it's kind of scary to fade him in the low risk contest. If you want to play him over one of the running backs, I certainly will not fault you for that. And it may even be the right move given his underperforming wide receiver status. So, with those 3 guys, consider them heavily in all GPP types. On DraftKings, especially consider them at the captain spot. But even on FanDuel, as we'll talk about here in a second, as a potential large field GPP strategy. The other idea I have tonight is that there are a lot of guys, and we see this on some of these high-powered offenses, and especially when there are some injuries that impact it. But there are a ton of guys tonight that are going to be definitely under 20% owned, many under 10%, and some even under 5% owned, that will see the field, that will allow you to fit in studs and allow you to differentiate your lineup. Let's talk about a couple. So obviously we have the Bills wide receiver situation. Now, with Knox out, this should mean a lot more 11 personnel. That is 3 wide receivers on the field. Before they had a lot of 2 tight end personnel with both Knox and Kincaid. We should see a ton of 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, which only means good things for Khalil Shakir, who's been leading their wide receiver group in wide receiver 3 snaps. Obviously, it's Diggs and Davis at the top, but Shakir, we look at him last week, 7.5 fantasy points. We would certainly appreciate that at $3,200. Could see even more snaps tonight. 24 snaps back-to-back weeks. Could see that push higher. I've always been of the belief that he's been their most talented guy after Diggs and Davis, maybe even over Davis. And it looks like the coaching staff is starting to see that, getting him more playing time. And at $3,200, I don't think he'll get over 20% owned just because of some of the other guys that are available. And it's not like he's completely blown the roof off just yet, but he's the type of guy that I think we want to play and get ahead of before he's seen the field for 50% plus of the snaps. So Shakir's another guy. But obviously, we're going to see Deontay Hardy get work. And he's not $200 like he has been on previous Bills showdown slates. So he won't be 20, 30% owned in some contest types. But then also Trent Sherfield sees the field. See a target or 2 at $400. He has flipped prices with Hardy seemingly on this showdown slate. Either way, a guy that if he catches a touchdown, gets multiple catches, and no one else around him does, could end up in the optimal lineup. So we have Bills receivers. We have the Bills tight ends I talked about. Joel Wilson, $200. He'll be 1% owned. We assume he'll be activated by 4 p.m. Eastern. Just double check and confirm that he is. And then Reggie Gilliam, 1% owned as a fullback tight end hybrid who could see his snaps increase. Is talented just in general, just by the eye test and according to beat reporters. And again, this is a guy that scored 0 points in all but 1 game this year, so no one's really going to play him. But he will have an elevated role tonight, which is something we'd like to see at $200. We have the Tampa Bay wide receiver 3 situation. Devin Tompkins has fallen behind Trey Palmer a bit. Trey Palmer more targets and more routes recently, but Trey Palmer is all the way up at $4,200. Devin Tompkins down at $1,600. They also gave Raheem Jarrett last week a couple of targets. Let's look here. So yeah, 2 targets last week. Should have, this isn't underperforming status by any means, but based on his 2 targets, we would have expected him to score 7 fantasy points. If he gets 7 fantasy points at $200, he's really in line to be in the optimal lineup, assuming none of the other guys do anything. So this is a guy for the largest contest only. And then we talked about the Tampa Bay running back situation at the very top. I've seen some projections across the industry have Keyshawn Vaughn as the number 2 running back. I've seen some projections have Sean Tucker get some work at $200. I don't think they'll have all 4 guys active. Let's monitor the pregame warmups to see which of these 3 are inactive. But if they brought Edmonds back, many of the beat reporters are, and especially fans, want to see some sort of spark in the run game. They don't believe Rachaad White has done it, but no one's taken the reins on the running back 2 job since Edmonds went down. No one's been able to overtake Rachaad White. But Edmonds back. Let's see if he gets the first crack tonight. And at $200, he's a guy, if he gets a couple carries, maybe a couple catches, he could end up in the optimal lineup. So all this is a way to say that if you want to jam in studs or play really popular lineups, especially in the largest contests, I'm not sure I'd play many of these guys in smaller field GPPs. But if you want to play Allen at captain, Diggs at captain, and you want to play chalk around it, you want to play Kincaid, you want to play these other guys that we really like, you can play just one of those guys and be really, really different and leave some salary. So that leads to a great FanDuel strategy. And the discussion tonight is we have Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs combined for a ton of MVP ownership. Kind of similar to how we saw Purdy and CMC on Monday night. Allen will be much more. So we have him approaching 50% in MVP ownership on the slate in our projected ownership in our Occupy model. Now, when you play someone like that who's super popular, there are some slates where there aren't many flex plays that you can differentiate with. Sometimes you have to differentiate with your MVP choice. However, because of all those guys that just listed, all of them will be definitely 10% or less, but many 5% or less, some just 1% owned. You can lock in Josh Allen as one potential option for if you're making 20 lineups, 150 lineups, 5, 10 lineups, whatever you're doing. Lock in Josh Allen to MVP and then cycle in the chalkier Bills receiver options, Diggs, Davis, Kincaid, while also adding in someone like Gilliam, Wilson, Shakir, Hardy, Sherfield, guys like that. So that is one way. When we have a slate like this where there's a popular MVP, but there are a ton of low-owned options, my preference is to lock them in and cycle those guys through. The other option, and Josh Allen hasn't been playing the best the last couple of weeks. I think that's not an outrageous statement to make. If he fails a little bit, I really like playing the wide receiver MVPs, especially when there's a 50% MVP, right? The leverage you gain if he is not the optimal MVP is pretty massive, especially in these larger contests with 80,000 people. So playing Diggs, Evans, Godwin, Gabe Davis, 3 underperforming wide receivers, mixing in with those guys is a really good way to get leverage at MVP. And then you don't have to be as different. You still want to get some differentiation in your flex. You don't want to be duped with 40 people if Gabe Davis is the optimal MVP. But if you mix in just one low-owned guy, you don't have to play those trashier guys like you would if you played Josh Allen at MVP. So I think it's a choice you have to make tonight. I lean towards locking Allen at MVP on FanDuel, but there's certainly merit to fading Allen at MVP and rotating in the wide receivers at your MVP. All right, let me see if there's any more ideas I need to talk about here. I think that's it. DraftKings, as far as MVP choices go, captain choices go, that same strategy applies here. Allen and Diggs are going to be 20%, 25%. We're not going to get 50% like they do on FanDuel. But if you want to lock in one of those guys or play them equally 50-50 in your large field GPPs, especially your small field GPPs, you have enough ownership differentiation at the bottom of the salary pool to get away with that and be different and have so many different options if you are right and they're the optimal captain. So lots of different ways to play tonight. It's an interesting slate, one of the more interesting slates we have just based on the variety of options at the bottom of the player pool and some of the mispricings. So for a full rundown, all this information condensed into one digestible format, make sure you read our daily plug, occupyfantasy.com. That's posted by 4 p.m. Eastern on our site. The link is in the description below. It gives rankings for different contest types for both sites, overall slate and notes, more in depth than I can go here, and lineup construction tips for specific contest types on both sites. Are you playing a 100-player league on FanDuel? How would I build a lineup there? The daily plug has that. I'm playing large field GPPs and mass multi-entry on DraftKings. What's the best way to approach that? It's in the daily plug. So make sure you check that out. Full roadmap for the slate. Our Occupy model is up and running. It'll update throughout the day. Has projected ownership for both sites. And if there are any late inactives or unexpected news, the model will update accordingly with rankings for both sites. Lineup builder, build up to 300 lineups using our optimal lineup criteria, our Occupy model values. Incredible way to make some of these rules I've been talking about. When Allen's in the lineup, min one of these trashier players, you can easily do that with the lineup builder. All right, that'll do it for the video. Appreciate you listening. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not already. 50-50 when we look at our analytics, who's subscribed and who's not, for who's viewing the channel. Let's get that closer to 100%. Understand if you're just stopping through, we appreciate you. If you like what you've seen and you're not subscribed, do so for free. Just click the subscribe button here on YouTube. You'll get notified when I go live or upload these videos Monday and Thursday. You'll get notified when we go live or upload videos for the main slate during the weekend for NFL. But also, our NBA team, who is crushing it through 2 days, if you play NBA DFS or you're interested in playing NBA DFS, they go live every single day before lock. So make sure you go check that out and make sure you subscribe to the channel here. That way you're notified when they go live as well. Give us a thumbs up. We appreciate it. Allows us to continue to make this content for free for you. Just giving us a thumbs up. Engagement, showing us that you like the content. Any questions, any comments, comment on the video below. I will happily answer them and get back to you before the slate starts tonight. If you want more in-depth discussion, chat with other members of the community, you want to talk with the staff, pick their brains, join our Discord server, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. That's especially important for NBA, by the way. That link is also in the description below. So, Brian Jester for Occupy Fantasy, thank you for listening, and good luck in tonight's Showdown slate.